Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
And here you have it. Jason Tatum, Joe Mazzulla, the whole cast of characters. Bill Stevens, Bill Nye.
Bill.
Jaylen Brown. Whole bunch of Celtics here. Derek White. Obviously, it's the whole gang. They're all here. They all did the media day thing. Our first chance to talk to Anfernee Simons as well. And we're going to break it all down with Noah Dalzell of SB Nation and CLNS Media, and Bobby Manning, of course, CLNS Media beat reporter, and talk about some observations, what we took away, vibes. A lot of this stuff is about vibes, I think, a lot of the time. And I just kind of got the feeling that you guys got. I actually have some vibes I'm going to share. And they're positive vibes, even though it doesn't sway my win total, but there's a couple of things that I thought I liked from today. But again, you're not expecting to learn a lot here. This is just a lot of, hi guys, how you doing? No, you'll be stunned. You'll be stunned. That's called a teaser. Okay. You'll be stunned. What my vibes were. Shocked. Trust me. But yeah, that's what we've got. Want to get started in 1 second here, but I'm trying to parse through all of our stuff here. We do want to tell you that the Garden Report is brought to you, as always, by our pals over at PrizePicks. Use that code CLNS to get
couple
50
football
in your
games
lineups
tonight.
Oh, so good. After you play your first $5 lineup, once again, PrizePicks, use code CLNS, get 50 in your lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy. PrizePicks, run your game. And our pals over at Game Time. Use that Game Time app. Download it right now. Code CLNS. Use the app for $20 off your first purchase. You want to get into games? We're going to have them. They're coming up. It's all happening. Basketball, hockey, football, best time of year. The convergence of all of it happening at the same time. Baseball playoffs as well underway. That's going to be a super hot ticket. You want to go check out the Red Sox and the Yankees. That is where you need to go. Check it out right now with our folks over at Game Time. So let's get into Media Day and just a general kind of feeling. We talked to everybody. Jason Tatum, who did his big media tour recently, was early on, and he came on there, but didn't provide much insight beyond what he's already told everybody. We did hear from Joe. We heard from Brad, and like everybody else, you have it. And our first peek at Anfernee Simons, he does exist. He's still here, which defied my expectations, but he's here, and they're going forward with the Anfernee Simons situation. So Noah, I'll start it off with you. What's your kind of big takeaway from today's overall vibe and just, the messaging and everything that everybody was trying to put out there in the first time we get a chance to, meet and see this whole new team, which again, a lot of disparate parts here. It's a real mishmash, and it is weird. It's different. It feels a lot different than it has the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think the vibes always feel good on Media Day, right? Like if they're ever going to feel good, Media Day is the day where that's the case. And certainly that was the case here. A couple themes that stood out is one, I do think their play style is going to be a lot faster than we've seen in recent years. And I know that a lot of fans, media members have been clamoring for that, as has Jaylen Brown. And almost everybody, when they were discussing like what they're expecting for the season, brought up pace. So like that's just a mental note to something to watch out for this season. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But then otherwise, like something that a lot of guys said across the board was just like how much Jason Tatum's been in the gym, how it's been inspiring for them, like how it's made them want to be better. All like that sort of thing was repeated by almost everybody that spoke. And then the last thing I'll say is Jaylen Brown seemed like really loose and really at peace and really happy. And he has, like, I've seen a lot of him this summer. Obviously, he's been streaming, and when he's streaming, he's been very candid and kind of conversational, like he's talking to his friends. But I was curious if any of that would spill over to the podium, and I feel like it did. And so I wonder if that will carry over throughout the season. But obviously, he's going to have a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on him this year, and it seems like he has a really kind of like relaxed approach to how this year is going to go. And that was like definitely noteworthy to see him at the podium the way that he was today.
So that was it. Noah stole my thunder, but she went first and she had every right to say it. That was my takeaway. My biggest takeaway today was Jaylen Brown looked so comfortable and at ease. He even, the chip on the shoulder that you sometimes get with Jaylen. And again, you would expect it this year because you've got the whole situation of him stepping in as the 1A guy, and Tatum's not here, and can he lead the team? And there's going to be doubters and there's going to be haters. And I just found him to be so chill and so relaxed the whole time and so comfortable. And I thought this answer was good when he was kind of asked about the role that he's going to have to play this year with Tatum being out.
Are the outside voices motivating for you, or do you tune them out, or have they changed your perception of what you think you should accomplish?
To be honest, I feel like in the past, the outside voices, I would be lying if I said they didn't motivate me, because they did. At this phase in my life, I'm not sure if I gained motivation from that. I feel like maybe the narrative that, we have grown to see, like the one option or whatever the case may be, to me, that's never really been a thing. I think that's just only been basketball is not like that. People who know the game, it's like any given night, anything can happen, etc. And then like you have number one options on offense, but you also have number one options on defense, and stuff like that. We only focus on the offensive side of basketball, but what about defense? People who are purists of the game know how important defense is. It's equally as important as offense, if not more. But we only care about the entertainment, about the highlights, about this, the step backs and the offensive part. But, number one option has to do a lot with defense as well.
So again, the first part of that I thought was the more telling, which is, when did he stop listening to the outside voices? Because as recently as like 3 months ago, I felt like he was still, not if not fixated, certainly aware. He's Mr. Cryptic emoji, tweeter when stuff is out there, the narrative, so to speak. And for him to say like, I don't care as much. He was up there. He was kind of very relaxed. He was all goofy and giddy over Bill Nye being in the house, talking about not just the kid in me, but the me in me, the adult, the guy right here. I still love this stuff. I liked his vibes a lot. I really did. As to whether or not, how he's going to be. Yeah, I don't even know if it's a Jaylen issue, whether he's able to lead the team. The team might be unleadable just based on the fact that there just might not be enough talent around him for him to be able to do anything special with it. But I definitely liked his vibe, coming in today.
Yeah, I think White, Pritchard all took pretty similar approaches, because I think with any one of those guys, you could say this is their year. They're going to get to do a lot more. This is where they're going to show what they're really made of. And all three of them said, yeah, I don't need to do too much. I can set other guys up. I can get other people involved. That was big with Jaylen, who, by my estimation, was the best story on the team this year. We talked about it from the day Tatum went down. This is his chance. He doesn't have to sacrifice now. He can show that he can lead a team. And that could have become the story of the day. And he pushed back against that. He went on the NBC stream and said, I feel confident in myself. I think that's more the media narratives between the 1As and 1Bs and all that type of stuff. Mentally, I don't partake in that. I just come out and be myself. And he said something pretty similar when I asked him right after Tatum went down, how he's going to approach leading the team into the near future here. So I don't have a good answer. Maybe Noah does, of why the flip on this. Maybe to not look like he's taking the full shoulder of this team and all the responsibility that's going to take place here. He was talking about having to play defense as a team, having to get other people involved, playing unselfish. So I think all three of those guys were trying to set a tone and welcome everybody in and share the glory when it comes to all the new people, and not just say, yeah, this is my time to shine. So that was a pretty collective approach. I think it was good to see the leaders of the team all on the same page in that. But this is something I was excited about, John, like the possibility of him showing that he's one of the best players in the league this year. So I was surprised, Noah, that he didn't go down that road.
I think there's a couple layers to it. One is, I actually feel like for a while he's been saying that he doesn't listen to the outside noise the way that he used to. Like, I literally remember the night they won the title. I think it might have been Gary, honestly, that asked about whether he felt like the finals MVP and the championship was to silence the haters and all that and the doubters. And he said, like, that's just not, I don't really think about that stuff the way I used to when I was younger. And honestly, for most of my time covering him, I don't think it's been as much of a thing as it was earlier in his career. So there's that piece, but I also feel like there's a directive across this team. I mean, John, he did say that on the night they won the championship. He could have said,
no. I'm just saying I don't buy it, because so much of last year was what people were saying. I still feel he's been doing, whether he's saying it or doing it. I think he's like, he says it, but then he does. It's the both sides of your mouth thing. I don't care, but I do want all of you guys to know before you go out there and start talking about exactly what a number one player it is, that it also involves playmaking and defense. And if you haven't noticed,
well, that's why you're saying, when did the switch flip? I don't think a switch flipped. I think
so
he's still going to say things.
Yeah,
throughout,
he's still
like,
trying to
even
shape
that
narrative.
answer.
Yeah, he's going to try to shape narratives, and I think he's always going to do that. And I think he does listen to it.
I don't really.
Go ahead.
We're 10 minutes into the season and we're already arguing about Jaylen.
Well, no, what I'll take back is that that answer to me wasn't necessarily fully emblematic of what I liked about his vibe. It was his general demeanor throughout the whole thing. I put this one out here because it's particularly pertained to the biggest question surrounding Jaylen Brown is, how are you going to be as the number one guy this season? Because I think that's what everybody wonders the most. I still question whether or not he's fully moved on from that stuff, regardless of whether he said it, because I do think even last year he was still really paying attention closely to what people were saying. You had the chase for 65, the injury situation, trying to put out there that he's making sacrifices and playing and this and that. And I think he's still very much in tune with what the narrative around him is. But I just didn't get the vibe that he was defensive today, because I thought a lot of the questioning might have made him, put him in a defensive position. And generally speaking, I don't think he got there.
I mean, last year he was calling himself the captain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't view these things as contradictory. Like, he very much, I feel like, views himself as the leader of this team. I think that he shoulders a big load and all of that. Like, I don't think the tides have turned. It's just that in a sense, I don't think any of these guys, and Derek was the most explicit about it, and Peyton as well, honestly, like, they don't want to be like, now I'm going to up my game in all these ways, and like, I'm going to shoulder more responsibilities. And even like Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla have echoed that sentiment of like, it's not Nimi now has to have a breakout year. Like, they have to change the way they play. It's not about Jaylen averaging 5 more points per game. Like, their whole style is more likely to have to change than that. And I think that that's what you kind of got from Peyton, Derek, and Jaylen in particular today.
Yeah. So what do you guys think in terms of the style stuff? Like, how do you see this going differently? We've talked about the benefit of either being down a Tatum or being down a couple of stars, and Noah, you've talked about it before, is it opens up what other people do. It gives other people opportunity, but also the benefit of Tatum not being around is pace naturally is going to pick up, because for all that Jason Tatum does well, which is pretty much everything, the one thing that that always gets to you is the pace. He slows it down, when others on the court might be looking to move it. You believe it? You believe that this team's going to be playing a different style with more pace? Because again, do they have the bodies to play that type of game?
Yeah, they're gonna have to, right? Like, I think that's the personnel they have. And I asked Brad to open the day because he said about 2 or 3 times over the summer, we have to play a style that's going to match the personnel that we have. I think he took that as we have a directive to this coaching staff to change. So he didn't really embrace it as much as you heard him over the summer today, when I brought it up. But for Joe, I do believe that they're going to adapt. I do believe that they're going to do some different stuff here. You heard a couple of the guys talk about ways that they're already starting to adjust their style. Josh Minot said that they're going to start taking some calculated risks defensively. That really stood out to me. Aggressiveness defensively, leading to offense. Pritchard talked about that. And then everybody was talking about the pace, as Noah pointed out there. So it's refreshing. I think they have players who are good at cutting. This was a team that was 26th in cutting last year. So that's going to go up. And then overall, just movement in the half court. Like, they've not been a very active team in the half court. As far as the threes go, and that's what everyone's going to latch on to some degree, I still think they're going to take a lot of threes. They probably should, given what they have here. They still have a lot of shooting. So I don't think that's going to change too much, maybe a little less than last year, but they were through the roof in terms of attempts last season. So listen, I've been around Joe some this summer, and I feel like he's open-minded and willing to adapt to what they have here. And they've done it with Porzingis, they've done it with Tatum to fit what he does best, and now around Jaylen. And I don't know if you agree, John. I feel like he's at his best in the open floor. He's at his best in transition. You don't want him necessarily sizing guys up in the half court. Like, this is a team, and you've mentioned it too, Noah, that wants to run. Horford wanted to last year. Pritchard always has. And Jaylen has said many times that they're at their best when they're moving fast. So
Noah,
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think stylistically things are going to have to change. Pace is an obvious one. The other big change is that they are not going to have 5 shooters on the floor most of the time. Like, anytime Kate is on the floor, they're probably, unless he turns into more of a shooter than we know, but they're not going to have the spacing that they did last year with Porzingis and Al playing center for most of the game. And so you're probably going to see more cutting. I think stylistically, it's actually going to be kind of a nice change of pace.
It'll be more fun to watch.
It might be more fun to watch. Yeah. And it might not be as effective. They've had some historically great offenses these past few years that if you just watch, it didn't always feel that way. A lot of times it felt a little bit stagnant or a little bit ISO heavy, but the numbers were the numbers, and the numbers, ranked them amongst some of the greatest offenses in league history. So I think not to oversimplify it, but more cutting and being, playing faster. And I don't know, Jordan Walsh today said that they're expecting to do a little bit of 5 players on the floor playing really, really hard and then subbing out and putting 5 players back on, kind of like middle school rec style. I don't know how accurate that is going to be, but that was an interesting quote just because that is not typically how NBA teams function, and certainly has not been how the Celtics have functioned, but would point to them leaning more towards the bench guys and giving everybody an opportunity if you're going to have a 10-man rotation.
That sounds great, right? I think this is what you have at media day and in training camp. We want to play differently. We want to play fast. We want to be
Everyone
aggressive.
says play fast every single media
Everyone
day.
says it. Everyone says it. But I'm looking at this and the hockey change sort of situation. And Noah, you want to know what my win prediction is. Every single thing about my wins has nothing to do with the players we know about. It has to do with everyone else. And I truly believe that right now you have 6 legit NBA players, and then a bunch of guys who are going to be everyone's playing up. That's my biggest problem is bench players are starting, players who are it doesn't mean you can't eventually go from being a bench player to starter, but you're asking basically 3 bench players to start this year. And you're asking 3-4 guys who were in the 11 to 15 portion of the roster to jump into the 7 through 10 portion of the roster. That's asking a lot of people. So the idea of playing with pace and throwing a lot of bodies out there, okay, I love to see it. But with who are those bodies outside of what we know? And you have Brown, you have obviously Derek White. We're going to put Hauser in there among the guys who can play, even though again he's going to be asked to maybe punch above his weight a little bit here. Pritchard, Anfernee Simons, and then everything after that is a bit of a question mark. You're stopping at 5, I think, of I feel good about this guy, and then everything else is a question mark from 6 through 15. So how are we doing this new style?
I think there's 2 ways it could go. 2021, we'll compare it to that. You had Tatum that year, but there was a lot of young talent that just couldn't fit in, didn't hit shots.
This isn't that team, though. We don't think. I mean, I'd love to be pleasantly surprised, but for real, who's doing that stuff that we want to see with the new pace and throwing a lot of bodies at him? Because again, we've seen the trend, the NBA, the Pacers, the Thunder, a lot of coaches, a lot of people going out there in their little media day runs, all acknowledging the same thing. I think things have changed. I think the NBA has changed. I think you're really looking at having a lot of depth and being able to use a lot of bodies. So again, when Joe Mazzulla said it earlier today, hey, what do I do in the offseason to better myself? I'm kind of paying attention to how the game is moving and how the game is changing. Philosophically, they might be in the right. in the right ballpark with what they want to do. I just simply don't know that they have the horses. No,
No,
I
and
don't
then
know if you. I don't know what you think
I
on
mean,
that.
listen, they might not. That's like I can't say for certain that it's
They
all
might
good,
not need
but
to though to play
somebody
hard.
somebody like Jordan Walsh, like I think that he has the upside this season to come in and like succeed in a system where they're pushing the ball, and if he's shooting the ball well and like they're respecting him and he can sometimes take them off the dribble. Like I think that there's a world out there where his game comes together in year 3. And I don't think anybody expected in the organization or in the outside world that in the first year or 2 of his career he was going to be impactful for this team. Like that was expected. So he's somebody that's like a question mark in a way where he could be a positive surprise for them this season. One guy who I personally haven't thought a whole lot about, but I think I've heard Luka Garza's name come up now on a number of occasions of somebody that stood out here over the summer.
Derek just said it, yeah.
And I think Peyton brought him up today, or a couple people brought him up today. And again, I'm not super familiar with his game. He's barely played in the NBA, but is there a world where he can come in and play a little bit of that role? Josh Minot as well has come up. I think the organization is a little bit higher on him than I necessarily was. And I know he had his struggles in Minnesota. So it's not a group of players who I think you can say like, this is going to be their guy. Like I'm not attaching myself to any one of these characters as like, this is going to be the guy that establishes himself as like a
wait till that first preseason
on
game
this
though.
team. But there's a bunch of potential options. And so it's more about the core. And like, I do think the coaching staff and the fact that there's continuity there and the fact that this is a coaching staff that has exceeded like regular season win totals year after year, like that's going to carry over too, even though they're not going to have as much talent on the roster. That's why I'm like a little bit higher on how many wins they're going to squeeze out during the season.
Yeah, they can find ways to manufacture points, stops, whatever it needs to be, scheming it up. And that's where I have confidence in Joe. Like we've seen them. I said this a million times. They were winning games starting Pritchard, Hauser, whoever through those stretches, Cornette. And the talent level, John, might be lower now than even that. But they can adjust. They can adapt to what they have here. And even if they're not hitting threes or they don't have great NBA skills, some of these bench guys you talk about here, John, if they can just get those guys to fly around like crazy and wreak havoc, like, I'd have to think back to like the Jonas Jerebkos of the world and guys like who were playing in 2017. But so much of those teams, from what I remember, was just flying up and down the floor, throwing bodies around and just going nuts. And that was what you didn't. The most frustrating thing to me over the last couple of years, as good as these teams were, it wasn't like a very intense, emphatic effort that was getting them by. It was their skill and their talent. And in the games where they'd lose to the Lakers because Davis and LeBron were out, they would just sit back on the skill and toss up shots. And, you'd have your real frustrating losses there. So I think the beauty of this year, even though it's going to be up and down on all over the place, is that you're just going to get this intense effort from them. And if that's their style and if that's what they're going to rally around here instead of talent, I actually do think that's going to make for a pretty entertaining watch, even if they're not super great. Oop, we losing John.
I think we lost John.
I don't know. Do you see similarities? I'm trying to feel if this team's more 2021 Noah, which was disappointing, or 2017, which was super fun.
Well, I feel like the camp of the 2021 team, because I don't think they're going to come in and have like too much talent where they don't know how to balance it all and that sort of thing. Like I feel like here they're either going to be like, they're just simply not going to have enough in particular the front court. Like, again, we talk about this team, but they're really not shorthanded in other aspects of the rotation. Like they probably have one of the best 3-man guard combos backcourt wise of any team in the NBA. Like,
yeah, they weren't overloaded with center talent in 2021 either, though. It was like Tice, Thompson, Grant, Cantor was still around, I think. Maybe.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to say like it's all in Amias Queta's hands, but a lot of what, the projections here for this team and like whether or not they're going to be, in the mid 40s or in the 30s or, chasing a playoff spot or whatnot, I do think it has to do with like 1 or 2 guys on this roster. And probably if I had to pick 2 would be like Amias Queta and Luka Garza. And that's a little bit challenging. Like that's a little bit like tough to hinge their potential success to two players who are relatively inexperienced in the NBA. So that's what I think it'll come down to, because I think people are going to be positively surprised with their backcourt rotation. Obviously, everybody knows I'm very high on Peyton Pritchard, but Anfernee Simons today on multiple occasions reminded us that he was the primary scoring option for Portland these past few years. And like, I kind of forgot that he was like literally the primary option these past 2 seasons in Portland. Like he led them in scoring. And now he's coming in and he's not going to be the primary option. And so there is a little bit of a luxury of like offensive talent in that sense. So that's the biggest question for me, is the front court. I've said it a million times. I think Brad Stevens literally said it today when I asked him about it. He said, like, it's hard to predict right now. It's hard to see where that's going to go. But if things go wrong here, that is most likely the position and the area that they will have struggled with the most, because anybody can play hard. If you're in the NBA and like they're on this roster, like anybody can play hard. Anybody can play together. Anybody can move without the ball. It requires a lot of buy-in and things like that. And I think that they could get there. Just considering like the culture of this team and the fact that there is continuity and some veterans that have been in a championship environment and all, kind of been there for those moments.
He said, we'll see how it goes early in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys got me again?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. I just want to make sure I was getting glitchy. So I just want to ask about it here. Like, Bobby, remember Denver won the title, right?
Yep.
A couple years ago. And they lost a little bit off that championship roster. And you remember what your attitude was by them losing like KCP
and Bruce Brown.
Yeah. What did you say about them?
They weren't a championship
Finished.
contender
Hooked.
anymore.
Yeah, can't get there. They lost 2 role players. The Celtics have lost 5 of their best 8 players. Like, I just want to be realistic on the amount of losses that they've suffered here. We've never seen a championship team gutted like this in such a short period of time. I do want to point out that this is the reality and everything else is fine. So I want to say, if Denver had lost half their roster and replaced it with Garza and Minot, you think, and we were listening to a podcast over there and the guy saying, I actually want to see what we're going to get out of Garza. I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be fine replacing Al
we're not
Horford.
talking about a title.
I know, but we would laugh. We would laugh that podcast off of our screen. Let's leave it at, it's possible that the people Brad himself basically in a soundbite today say, you saw the type of contracts we gave out, right? Like, he's basically saying, like, you saw the type of bargain basement. So this stuff can work. I mean, anybody who's watched Boston sports knows, like, it can work. The 2003-2004 Red Sox were built on the bones of castaways, okay? David Ortiz being the most famous among them. 2013 Red Sox also had that. Bobby mentioned that team, the Jonas Jerebko and that Isaiah Thomas. Castaways, IT, Jay Crowder.
And they just coached up a storm.
That stuff can come together, and when it does, it actually is beautiful. It's magical. Those are fun seasons. But to expect it, I think, is a little bit much. That's all. Like, I would love it if those Island of Misfit Toys sort of teams that you're like, how in the world are these guys doing it, are great. And I hope that the Celtics are one of those teams. But realistically, again, it is they reached into the Building 19 bin to put this roster together. Yeah.
We generally agree with where the team's going to be at. I think you're a little lower. We're both in playing territory right now. And so, the teams that live in that area are like the Raptors and Bulls and, those kind of teams. That's where this team is. And that's where we expect them to be. So, the only guy who brought up championship today was Walsh.
No, I'm not even talking championship. I'm saying if you just lost Porzingis and didn't replace him, you'd be like, all right, that's going to hurt.
We have Joe on expectations.
But they're still good enough. But if you lost Porzingis and Holiday, you'd be like, all right, that's a lot. If you lose Porzingis and Holiday and Horford, okay, well, at least we got Luke. No, wait, we don't have Luke either. Well, Tatum and Brown will be oh no, wait, Tatum's hurt for the year. It's everything. I don't know.
And Tatum's the big one.
Yeah, I feel like, it's Tatum. If it was Tatum and Brown could carry any roster to 45 to 50 wins. Any group of players, those two. The Tatum factor is so massive that it's just impossible to overlook. You could have lost all of those guys, and Tatum and Brown could have willed these guys to a 3 seed. There's no question about it. Anyway, this is Joe talking about expectations here.
Do you need any more motivation? Like, how is your mental approach entering this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I ever get to the point where I start, basing my motivation on the expectation of others and people that I've never met before, I'll retire and quit. So, to me, it's like you wake up every day and you have a standard and expectation for your family, for your household, and then when you come in for the building, and regardless of who's on the team, that'll never change.
Yeah, and he had said too. He had said too.
My expectation
every year-
always is to win a championship. I always expect it. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then he kind of backpedaled a little bit and was like, yeah, there's some things you can't control that go into that. But, we're focusing on championship all the time. And that's why you do this. So, there was some acknowledgement across the board about the situation here. And I think going back to what we opened with, Jaylen and, the other guys being pretty free and loose, it's pretty easy to do that when no one thinks you're going to be any good at all here. I don't think anyone looks at this team as being great.
Yeah. Can I give you my other vibes takeaway?
Yep.
I loved Joe today.
Joe was solid.
I liked Joe. I just liked, again, I think Joe, knowing again what everybody's saying and thinking, and that he's always going to be questioned, and that there's going to be a spotlight on him, didn't have that vibe at all.
He knew Simons Pritchard was a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, were you there for that, John?
Fine. He knows. I mean, he knows what he's doing, and he knows what he wants to shut down for sure. But still, I like Joe's overall demeanor and vibe with the way that he approached things, with the understanding of like, yeah, we're going to set high goals for ourselves, but we fully recognize that this is going to be different.
Yeah, it's going to be different. And I think when the bar's low, and we all have pretty low bars for this team, it's easy to exceed it. And so I think that's going to be the beauty of this team to some degree, acknowledging that, yes, Tatum's going to be out. You made the Denver comparison, John. If it was Bruce Brown and KCP going out the door and you didn't have Jokic for half the year, that's where it gets scary. And that's where the Celtics are at right now. But you have Brown, you have Pritchard, you have White. And I'll stress this too, because I keep saying it. The competition's not that great. And it just keeps getting worse. So I think that opens another door for this team, and that, Philly's coming in here without Embiid and George possibly. And then, other guys on top of that. And you're looking at the Heat without Hero for a while. And every team seems to be having a new injury every day. And those are just opportunities. So I think with the line we're at, and, we had the discussion all off season, is it a tank year, or is it you're in the mix, you're in the conversation at the bottom of the conference year? And if they're at the top of the conference somehow, I think that'll be a miracle and something we're not even anticipating went extremely right. But I don't think there's much disagreement about where this team's at. I think the fans even have, I have a lot of gripes with the fans sometimes. I think the fans have their expectations fully in tune and understand why they made all the moves they did, and why Horford walked out the door yesterday, and why this might not be the best season ever. Like, I think they're even in pretty good.
Again, nobody's deluded into thinking it's a championship team. I think some people are going to remain optimistic that it could work. And I think that that's perfectly fine.
Well, this is a Joe year, right? What's he going to do?
Nothing. It is what it is. That's how it's gonna play. We want to talk quickly about our pals over at PrizePicks before we move on here. And again, you guys know the drill. Pick more, less. There are the buttons. Bing, and it's close. Kickoff coming up. I don't know if you're gonna get there for the 7:15, but you got a shot. There's a second game tonight. If you want to get in on football action, use that code CLNS. You see it right there. Play 5, get 50 into your lineups instantly. Get 50 into your lineups when you play 5. That is it. Win up to 2,000 times your cash. Pick 2 or more players. Play it however you want. Mix and match sports if you like. I like to lock in. I either lock in on one game, or I lock into, when you're doing football, a window, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever it is. And I think that's always easier there and more fun, but you can play it however you want. Make sure you log in and also check out ton of cool offers all the time and options where you get free squares or virtually free squares and all these different types of plays that you can insert into your lineup and make it so it's much easier to win cash today. So once again, PrizePicks, download the app code CLNS, get 50 inserted into your lineups when you play 5 right away. PrizePicks, run your game. Let's get back to it. Another person of interest, a big person of interest here is Anfernee Simons, who we didn't think. And Bailey, can you remove that thingy? Where is that? Let me get it off the screen. We didn't know if Anfernee Simons existed. We never saw him, right? Everyone else made some appearances, be it Vegas or a charity event or something. They were around. Get that off the screen. Trying to block it. Anfernee Simons was not. And again, the thought was maybe they were trying to trade him, maybe not. I think everybody in this room likes the player and was intrigued when they got him. And then we've been over this a ton. The reporting was that he wasn't going to be here. He's here. It looks like they're starting the season with him. And that's great because he's one of the more talented scorers, certainly on the team. If not, in the NBA at his position, he can score the basketball, as they say. The question is, can he play defense? Can he hold up? And that's always been a knock on him. That's a knock on him, not just in terms of how he's viewed, at each place he's been, but also just the way that the NBA is going, why he might not have had the value. People didn't want to spend that kind of money on a person who could just score, but might be a liability on the defensive end. And I want to play this bite because this is kind of where my head's always been at with it. He was asked about that today. This is our
latest conversation about this. Yeah.
Yeah. By Corrales.
One of the criticisms about you is defensively on that side of the ball. Right. What have you spoken to Joe about when it comes to that? The Celtics are a defensive-minded team. And what do you think you can bring on that end?
Yeah, we've talked about it, and it's just a matter of if I want to do it or not. You know what I mean? It's really that simple. Like I said, coming into a culture like this, you have to be able to adapt, or you're not gonna be in the position that you want to be, and whether it's playing or not playing. So to me, it's really that simple, and that's the the honest conversations we had about it. And he always says that you're not as bad as people think you are, and so that's good to hear. But also, I got to do the work too.
So, you know what that tells me now that I think about it?
Yeah. What?
There's no chance he starts until he shows he defends.
Maybe. No. What were your thoughts there?
I didn't have an interpretation relating to the starting lineup, but pretty funny line. I actually didn't catch the first time around until I went back to transcribe it, but that you're not as bad as people think you are. He knows it. You could see it was funny, his demeanor when asked that question from Corrales. Like, normally players get a little bit defensive when a part of their game is so actively critiqued. And for him, it's like, it's the most open secret that's the knock on his game, that he wasn't even like rattled that came up. He knows it. Everybody knows it. What's interesting though is that the way he framed it is like, I just have to do it. And you would think that if that's all it is, he would have done it by now, but it's maybe a little bit of a sign of like the culture that he came from and the Portland team that he's played for the last few years. But we'll know soon in a couple of weeks if like, does he really have like defensive issues that are insurmountable, or is it just that he hasn't ever been 100% locked in on that end?
Yeah.
Considering who was around him, like that, it made it sound a little bit like it was just like he hasn't really tried his best on the defensive end,
right? Which is weird, right?
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny to admit that, like, I kind of just haven't really felt like it, which was what I found hilarious. There is like, oh, why haven't you tried? It's important, right? And that was like one where I wouldn't love that answer, like, oh, so you could have been doing this the whole time, it's just a matter of wanting to. Like, so are you going to want to now? Are you going to want to if this team isn't winning? When are you going to want to? But I've said it from the start, because Bobby and I go back and forth, and I always say, like, exactly that. Like, oh, F defense. Not that defense doesn't matter, that I think defense is will for most people. There's some guys who are too undersized or just don't have the foot speed and the physicality to be able to compete. Anfernee Simons is a phenomenal athlete with a 40-inch vertical leap who won a dunk contest. This guy
good length,
is
good speed,
athletic, length, speed. The idea, and fine, slightly undersized, but the idea that he can't commit to the defensive end and be a competent passable. You think he can't play Peyton Pritchard level defense? Peyton Pritchard's been outstanding, on the defensive end, just by competing. And Simons should be able to do that and then some. So I've always thought it's a matter of will. And Bobby, that's why I dismiss defense. Not that it's not important, that it's like defense is a choice. It's a choice in many cases.
Well, you got two comments, him saying that, and then you got Jaylen saying, you got to be the number one option on defense. And we got to talk about defense here and blah, blah, blah. So, I veer more toward the Jaylen side of things. And it's going to be hard to build around some of the defenders they have here. Even trying to hide a guy like this is going to be more difficult. Like you said, John, when the depth just gets hit the way you do.
But it might not be hiding him. Like, I think there's a question of is he inherently going to be a liability defensively? Or
well, that's going to be the question this year, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you just going to give up Simons matchups over and over
It
and over
doesn't
again
matter.
if he's going to be out there?
It
does matter,
doesn't
John. We can't sit here and say
it doesn't matter because he's playing no matter what. It doesn't. Everyone's saying here in the chat he's not going to play until he can play defense. For absolutely he is. He's going to play about 35 minutes a game, even if he's an atrocious defender, because there's no other option. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, he's going to play a ton, whether he can defend or not, or whether he chooses to defend. So this notion that this is not last year's Celtics. If Anfernee Simons was a deadline addition to last year's Celtics, you better believe if he wasn't defending, he's not playing minutes over Holiday or White or Pritchard even. No chance. On this team, he's playing a ton. So you hope that it kicks in and it locks in and that he does play, because there's no choice. He's going to play a ton. Unless there's no luxury here. You're going to have, it's not hiding people. These are your people. Like, we've seen it. This lineup right now, you've seen Keita get exposed on pick and rolls before. You've seen Hauser get picked on and done fairly well. You've seen Pritchard get picked on and held his own. Simons is going to get picked on. They're going to play. 4 of their core players have in the past been guys targeted by other teams. They're all playing. So there's going to be some matchup issues there. It really comes down to whether or not he's going to try and commit to it.
Yeah. And I still have a question over how much they wanted him, how much they were willing to keep him here if they had other options to move on from him. So I think that goes into how much you're utilizing him too. We'll see, right? Based on how much Joe's going to utilize all of these guys. You're right, John. They don't have a lot of options there and alternatives.
Yeah, you're not going to be like, he's not committing to defense, so I'm going to go with what? You're not. You're going to play him because he has tremendous value for what he can do. He's an elite scorer. He's going to play.
This is going to be our guy this year, John. You're going to be like, just play him, screw it. I'm going to be like, he's got to defend. They're attacking him. We've had so many guys like that over the years.
Look, I think our brains have been rotted by what was nearly a perfect Celtics lineup over the last couple of years, and that's the problem is you don't get this. Most teams don't have this. It's generational. An entire lineup of people that can switch, defend multiple positions, defend their position, and shoot the ball. Are you kidding me? Like, all of that's gone. You're going to have lineups out there where 2 guys can't shoot at all and a couple of guys can't defend. You're just going to have to live with it. And it's going to be sloppy and messy. It comes down to the effort, and it comes down to finding different ways to get wins. But like, they can't do what they've done before simply because you can't construct a team like that. It's nearly impossible. They were literally almost a perfect team in terms of what they wanted to do and what they were able to do with the personnel. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, for some reason, Noah, no one wanted this guy around the league. And I don't know why. It could have been the money, but I have to imagine the defense and whatever the issue is on that end had to play into it too. Because he's talented as hell.
Right. But he's talented, but he's on a $28 million expiring contract. And the one thing that we learned this offseason is that it really was not about the players. It was about the contracts. And there were contracts around the league of good players that were waived because teams wanted to get below the second apron. It was like, I think this offseason solidified that under this new financial structure, it's all about money and it's all about contracts. And also bucket getters are not highly valued right now because it's really easy to score in the NBA. And I think we saw guys like Colin Sexton, guys like Norman Powell, who are coming off of like really strong offensive years, really not be valued very much. And so he was one of many in his, archetype of player that was clearly, not valued as much as he would have been, I think even 1 or 2 years ago. And so the reality is that this season is a big opportunity for him too, because he is in a contract year. We haven't had a contract year player in a while, but he's in a contract year, and he knows now from all the discourse this offseason once he was traded that the big knock on him is on the defensive end. So on one hand, yes, he's going to have to buy in because Joe Mazzulla is a motivator and he's part of a different culture. And there's a lot of good defenders on this team and a different energy around defense. And I think where he's coming from. But on the other hand, for his own self, I think he's going to realize how important it is for the next contract that he signs. And so if he comes in and defends for a few months and looks really good, they might trade him because then they can get below that first apron, get out of the luxury tax. And if they're not really trying to compete at the end of the season, like that could be a move that they make. Or if he's awesome, then it's like maybe you just found a piece for the future, because you certainly lost a lot of pieces, this offseason, and they're looking for young players or looking for new talent. And so I could really see it going in either direction, but I think he's going to be a good defender this year. I actually do, because there's not a fundamental, like if his energy today had been like, it's something that I've really struggled with and I'm going to pick up new techniques this year, like that's not the vibe, like Peyton Pritchard talked about being undersized and making up for that. And that's not really the case here. Like he doesn't have any reason to be such a big liability.
I'm concerned just because the Blazers were one of the best defenses in the league to close last year. And when he played, they were still pretty bad. So I don't know what it is. I got to dive into the film on it and take a close look at what's going on there. But to me, especially in the modern NBA, there is a little bit more than just try really hard. And he hasn't been trying. And he was on a bad team. Like that was a good defensive team. And he was pretty rough. So I don't know why it hasn't clicked there. But I do think, John, somehow, some way, if he's awful, they'll reel back on him somehow, play extra wings, ramp up Pritchard's minutes. Like they're not. You remember with Keita and Porzingis was out, and like they were ripping him off the floor even when he was starting a game over mistakes.
I
Like,
know, but I mean, you had so much talent everywhere else. You didn't need
a
classic big. You could play any sort of lineup, and you were still okay. But we'll see how
Joe's
it goes.
a big defensive guy. He really is.
He is. But again, he's gonna have to change his style too, and his expectations. Go ahead, Noah.
No, the last thing that I'd add is that like he was their primary scoring option last year. And if you look around the league, like unfortunately, this is the reality of the NBA, that the top scoring options on most teams are a little bit leaving a little to be desired on the other end. Like that's just a trend, which is ironic that I covered the WNBA. That's not the case at all. But that's the way that it's worked. And so he might find, he talked about it today, he's not going to be the number one guy. He knows that Jaylen Brown's going to be that player on this team. He might end up being the third or fourth option. Like, I don't know how it's all going to play out.
Yeah.
But that gives you some energy to leave on the other end. Like when you're not on a playoff team and you're just going for 30 a night, like I think your priorities start to get a little bit messed up. And now that's not the situation anymore. So it's an open question, but I don't think that it's like a surefire thing that he's going to be like a problem on that end.
No doubt. We got a few more odds and ends we want to talk about. Also, possibly one of the better sound bites of the day from Josh Minot here, talking about his new coach. But before we do that, we're also going to talk about Brad Stevens and how things went down with the Al Horford situation. Al, of course, recently, finalizing his move to the Warriors, which we all knew was going to happen. But first, we're going to tell you about our pals over at Game Time. Check it out right now, the Game Time app. Download it. Use code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. You want to get into any cool events or lame events, it doesn't matter. Go wherever you want to go. But if you can't get tickets, check out Game Time. All-in pricing, so there's no hidden fees at checkout. Panoramic views from your seat, which is an awesome feature. It's such
need that if you're going to Fenway.
App. Very intuitive. You need it if you're going to Fenway. You could end up behind a pole, my friends. I've done it before. So check it out, Game Time. There it is again, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Yes, I watched Pedro versus Roger in 1999 behind a pole in the right field grandstand and loved every second of it. And that's okay. I waited out all night for tickets. But you don't need to do that right now. Go to Game Time. So checking in on a couple different things here. One of them, the Al Horford situation. Brad was asked about it because I don't know if I'm looking for something here. It's always interesting. The tax doesn't matter, but also we're not going to pay for good players who want to play here. It just really comes down to, yeah, it kind of does matter. But here was Brad talking about the losses that they incurred throughout the year, particularly with guys like Al and Luke, who they did try to bring back?
We offered both Al and Luke the opportunity to stay. But I think you can see where our contracts were with who we signed, that we were going to be handcuffed around the aprons a little bit. And I think that is part of the, we knew that there were going to have to be big moves. And then in addition to that, Luke played his way into a great opportunity and great contract, and we couldn't be more thrilled for him. Those phone calls are hard because you're not going to see those guys every day, but you're also like jacked for them, like to get a chance to do that. And then Al, same thing. Like, we gave Al an offer, and but there wasn't any expectation that he wouldn't take a bigger offer elsewhere and go play, because that's his right.
So they offered them. What do you think they offered them? Vet minimums?
I've said it, a bunch. 5 years at the minimum for Luke.
Yeah. Bobby, if I offered you $5 a week to work here, is that an offer?
Yeah, I don't think they were, the Luke one, I've said this a couple of times. I'll actually give them the Luke one. In guaranteed money, it was comparable. The Al one, if it was the minimum, was not. He got twice that from the Warriors for 2 years. So they didn't make a serious run at keeping Al. And I don't love that, Noah, even though, we're all just throwing our hands up and saying, gap year, he's old, he went to a winning team, Tatum's hurt. I think it helps to have some continuity, specifically at a position where you have absolutely no clue what you have right now. And that's not just this year, that's the following year when Tatum comes back.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of criticism, especially, and I haven't seen really people criticize Luke because I think everybody understands that he's been on minimum /2A/G League his entire career. But obviously Al is in a different financial spot. But at the same time, I don't know, and Al hasn't spoken to the media yet. He wasn't part of Warriors Media Day today, but I don't know how much of it was the money versus thinking that he was joining a team that, whether or not, like, we can sit here and argue whether they're championship contenders, the Warriors, but they're going for it. They are all in for this season. They have a core of guys that are all kind of in a similar spot in their final years here. And nothing that the Celtics did this offseason indicated that they were going for it this season. So whether, we can say, Al should have not taken more money elsewhere just because, or maybe it was more the situation, but I think that combination of factors, it's a pretty rational decision, I would say, for him to go elsewhere. And I don't think that people should expect loyalty from players when organizations routinely have no loyalty.
I have no problem with Al going. Yeah, no. I have a problem with the Celtics not making a serious run to keep him.
Yeah, I would have.
That's what it comes down to. Yeah, that's what it comes down to is if you're talking about a little bit more and a little bit more tax that you say you're okay to pay, you're obviously not. There was a line. So this is where we come down to is there. Don't tell me you weren't hamstrung when you couldn't offer guys like Al and Luke enough competitively to stay if they wanted to stay. The difference between an Al or a Luke on this team versus not is immeasurable. Even Luke, a real professional.
I can't believe we just came to accept this. Could you imagine?
That to me is shocking. Like, it's just, well, they can't. But for them to say it's not an issue, really, and we would have gone to get good players, and then Brad to say, well, we offered them, but I mean, they went and took real money, and look at the contracts we offered everyone else.
Look at the guys we signed, yeah.
That's what we were dealing with. That means you had a number in mind. I'm so tired of, well, I don't think they're really concerned with it. Of course,
and the second apron stuff.
There's a clear number there that they're trying not to exceed for a team that they don't think is necessarily going to be competitive. And they're showing you their hand about their expectations by not making legitimate offers to types of guys. Like, when you have zero in the till behind these bigs and you leave it to Neemish Queta and you go get Garza and you're like, I like these guys. You're just basically saying a few. Like, it's going to be bad. Maybe it ends up being good and we're lucky, but if it's bad, oops, shoulder shrug. We'll get him next year. I think that's almost a criminal position to leave this team in without any sort of real NBA players or depth at that position.
I just can't believe what we've come to expect, Noah, because let's say on May 1st, when they got out of the first round, you said, yeah, they're going to lose Horford, Porzingis, and Cornet this offseason, and they're going to get nothing back for any of them. Like, who in the world would have thought that was acceptable? But that's where they are.
Keita.
I like
Keita. I no, you don't. You don't get to say that. You don't get to like Keita. No.
You guys try to make it okay to.
We've drawn lines in the sand. You don't get it. No, you don't get to like Keita. But I don't know. That to me is a little bit frustrating. This was a tough spot to leave the team in, and those were the only guys who you could have brought in to not have them be as big a bind. You can say whatever you want to say, and then say that everybody who's playing is going to be better than we expect, and that other guys will develop and this and that. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that they have the worst big men in the entire NBA, and that's a tough thing to have. Like that's it's hard to be competitive when you I'm not going to say zero, but that's a massive hole on this roster, and they just left it there. Bobby, you were like, you guys spent all off season saying it, Bobby, you in particular, right? Like, they've got to do something there. They're not going to not have anybody. They're not going to just start the season with Keita. Yes, they are. That's what they did.
Well, they brought in Chris Boucher, which I'll give them
I
a
also
little
like as a deep bench piece.
Like if he wasn't here, they'd have the worst situation in the league. I don't know. I like what Indiana has, but they're down there too. Bringing him in was helpful, and I don't know if they're actually going to use him as a big or on the perimeter. That's going to be interesting to watch here. But I thought it was so telling, though, as John said, look at the money we spent at the center position, effectively saying that's all we could offer Horford and Luke. And he's in a tough spot, right? Because I almost think there's no doubt at this point that they're financially limited in some way for this season at least, and we'll see what the ownership group does the following year. That's when they'll be judged. But I've had enough of the second apron talk, and I'm so glad Sam Presti on Oklahoma City was like, if we don't keep our guys, it's not going to be the second apron. Like, it's going to be the tax. And we have reason to think we can keep this team around based on the income we have now with the new arena and all that. They're so lucky that Tatum went down, just from a PR standpoint, that Tatum went down and people lost all expectation in them, and that the second apron thing came along that they could blame instead of the tax. That's just where I'm at on it. And I think that became a little more clear today.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, I think that Al is undervalued, broadly speaking, by probably the Celtics and the fan base and everybody, because I think as much as he's beloved and everybody loves Al, like when it comes to actually like what he has been able to do on the court for this team, I think it's been undervalued. Like the connective role that he's played on both ends, and his availability, his durability is insane. Like the amount of games and minutes that he played for this team over the past few seasons.
Insane.
I think at any moment, everybody expected him to just, have this massive downfall, and it just never happened. And I would reckon that a big part of why they didn't offer him a bigger deal is not just the finances, but because we know that the Celtics have this tendency to think, okay, like Marcus Smart's about to go off a cliff, like let's get rid of him now. We think maybe Drew Holiday, they felt similar about, like, obviously the money there was a problem, but they like to trade guys earlier rather than later. And I think with Al Horford, like, they probably don't think that he has another good 2 years left. And I actually think that he probably does, and we'll see what happens. But just going off of how the last few years have gone, like, you can keep counting him out, and he continues to perform better than most centers in this league, especially in big games, especially in big moments.
That's what I want to hear. Like,
so
say you want to invest in some young guys. Say you believe in some of the guys on the come up here. Say,
that's
I know
the
you
case,
can't.
Though.
Right.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I think that in this moment today, I thought Brad's answer was pretty diplomatic. And honestly, like, I think Brad's really, really good at this. Like, he says the right thing in tough moments. But the reality is that they took some flyers on guys. We keep talking about, like, is this team going to surprise us? It's going to come down to, like, is any combination of Luka Garza and Josh Minot and, Jordan Walsh, are any of them going to hit? And so the more spots available that they have for those guys, the better as well. I just think that Al Horford could potentially be good next year too. And so if you think this is Al's last season and they don't think this year is a contender year, they may as well save a few bucks and bring in a guy that could potentially be the next Luke Cornett. Not Al Horford, who's going to be 40 at that point. Like, I get the thought process. I think I just value Al extremely high, not just as a player, but also as a leader, as a culture setter. And I think that they might end up regretting it. I haven't criticized a lot of their offseason moves, but I think this is one where I do think they should have made it a bigger deal. But I also don't think that we need to view it as like, oh, they're being dishonest about how they're framing the money thing. Because all that they've said, to my understanding, is all that they've said so far is that they have no mandate to get below the luxury tax. They were very adamant about the fact that they had to cut.
They're not
right?
under the luxury tax, but there was a limit. It was a clear mandate to cut, certainly under the second apron. But then again,
$200 million in tax.
This is where you're in that middle ground right now, which is I could keep us under the second apron and probably round out this roster with a couple of good players, but we're going to be bumping right up against it. Are we cool? And the answer was probably we're not cool with that. And that's where I say I'm not going to say dishonesty, but if there was a little bit of wiggle room to bring back a guy like Al, and it's a bummer that they didn't, because I do think it would have made a huge difference on this team here. To have his presence. I agree, Noah.
And what you said, Noah, was so true with this possibly being a decision to move off three guys whose value is going down at this point. And, I think you're right to not agree that, Yeah. And I think you're right to not agree on the Horford point, but if he doesn't look great out there in Golden State, all of a sudden you're like, all right, maybe they got ahead of that one. And then with Porzingis, obviously, I think the whole fan base looks at it and says, do you see how he looked in May? Like, how are you signing on for another year of that? And if that's how he looks in Atlanta, there's going to be some victory laps over that. And I certainly love the idea of moving on from Holiday at the point he's at right now. I think that was an awesome move, even with all the Simons thing and how that's gone. So I know you can't come out publicly, John, and just be like, listen, these guys are about to go off a cliff, and that's how you're positioning these moves. But I just get frustrated in how it's positioned. Like, we had to do this because we lose our pick 7 years down the line if we don't. Like, I just don't think it's authentic. And I don't.
Do you buy though that they had to get out of the second apron on a season?
I never did.
So do you think that it would have been reasonable to expect the Celtics to be in the second apron this season?
If they were a couple million over the second apron line, they could have kept the center. I said all along, keep Porzingis. He can play off Jaylen.
Yeah.
He can, maybe come back on a cheaper contract after that.
Billionaires
Move him at the deadline.
I think you're rich, you buy the Celtics, spend all the money in the world. I'm never going to defend owners for not wanting to spend money and all that. But the realistic expectation is that they would not be in the second apron this season, considering the circumstances, considering there are real implications that are legitimate from talking. Like, I've talked to people around the league that feel like they should have shed more salary. Like, they still have, this made no sense that they retained as much salary as they did.
I actually don't agree. I don't disagree, Noah, because once in for a penny, in for a pound, or whatever the reverse of that saying would be, once you've decided we're going to gut it. Like, that's what I didn't get. Why are you stuck in the middle right now? You're either trying to field a competitive team, or it's a full-on rebuild, and just eat it. Take it on the chin for a year and wait for Jason Tatum to return and reload. People would be okay with that. It is weird. And I do think a lot of that centers around their inability to trade players, particularly someone like Simons, without giving away more assets, which I think they desperately did not want to do, because they don't want to deplete that, the stock even further. Well, that's I believe where they're at.
It's also them not wanting to get into the business of seriously considering trading White or Jaylen. And that might be where they end up getting to eventually, because they don't have the premium assets. And the roster, as you mentioned, John, still expensive for what it is.
The soft tank was so obvious here. You've seen other teams. You saw the Warriors do it when they lost Curry and they lost Clay. Those guys come back off of injuries, and then they're a good team again, but they've got, high draft picks. You saw, again, the Indianapolis Colts do it the year where Peyton Manning was out for a full year. They tank. They get number one pick. They get Andrew Luck. They're back just like that. That stuff happens all over the place. That's what a lot of people thought might be happening here. They're stuck a little bit in the middle. I want to move off it because we're going to have a lot more in this conversation here. A couple other moments. I thought that this was cool. We're talking about vibes. I thought this was a pretty cool Joe Mazzulla bite. We talked about Jason Tatum. He didn't say a ton today. that we haven't heard. He did say that he has no expectations on himself for when he's going to return. But it was kind of boilerplate stuff. And I think he said a lot better things on his national media tour than he said in front of the media today. But Joe Mazzulla was asked what kind of role he's played in Jason Tatum's rehab and recovery and being there as a coach. And here's what he had to say.
It's your responsibility as a coach to be there for you guys. So, whenever I could lift with them, whenever I could be there for treatment, whenever I could rebound for them, I think it was important to do that. I think as a guy that's going through stuff, you have to know that going through it together. And I think that's a piece that's important. So I was there for the first time he walked. I was there for the first time he ran. I was there for the first shots that he took. So I think it's important, and you try to do that for everybody.
Look at that. Joe
First
loves
steps
Tatum.
for Jason.
Love. It's like his baby. He was there to see him take his steps and this and that. I thought that was cool. Thing from Joe. When we joke about the I love you stuff, and I told him I loved him, but like his commitment to the guys and to the players here is so clear and so obvious. Like how he takes coaching well beyond like it's just basketball. It's he is one of these coaching his life sort of guys here, and I thought that was really emblematic. Noah.
Yeah, and I think if you look at how he spent his offseason, I mean, he visited Derek White in Colorado. He went to Utah State with Neemias Queta for a panel. Like, he was all over the place. And I thought that a couple of guys today mentioned that his gift really is that he tailors like himself to the person. Like, he learns kind of what makes each guy tick and really kind of develops that strong relationship with them. And I know we've talked a lot about, whether he should have been extended and his playoff record and his regular season record, but his number one thing as a coach is the way that he's able to connect with people and have them all buy in. And there's a lot of different kinds of people on this roster in all different ways. And to our knowledge, he's had buy-in from everybody throughout his tenure. So that was a cool little tidbit. But I think that every time I would hear about what he was up to in the summer, it was like a side quest to like connect further with one guy on the roster. And it seems like that's, he talks about it openly about how he wants to have those like daily interactions, but it's no surprise that he was like really keen on being a big part of Tatum's recovery as well.
Yeah, are he and Shireman okay?
What do you mean?
Didn't they have a little beef?
Oh,
they had
that
a
was
standoff in the doorway.
Are you referring to that like hallway standoff?
The standoff.
That was a funny story. That was a funny one.
John, did you miss the party on Saturday night after Tatum's video came out?
Enough. I'm not doing this.
It was great. It was awesome.
I'm not doing it. But I'm not. I'm just not getting into it. So you have Joe Mazzulla, and what we know him to be, but for some people, they're learning who Joe Mazzulla is for the first time, which is always super interesting. We referenced Baylor Shireman. He came on the Garden Report and told some funny stories. Among them being that Joe, it's just some, interesting stuff, but Joe hates rookies. They had a little standoff. You've heard people through the NBA finals. A lot of people were asked about it, and just kind of like the crazy Joe Mazzulla stories, and everybody's got some, but some people are seeing this guy for the first time. And, we've come to like love the crazy, but some people, they got to witness it firsthand to really get a sense of what it's about. And here's Josh Minot talking about his impressions of Joe Mazzulla.
Man, it's amazing. He's inspiring, truthfully. A little bit of a weirdo, but he's a great dude, though, man. Like he's someone that like he inspires like passion. He's definitely someone that like, man, just from the month and a half of knowing him, man, I feel like I'd run through a wall for him.
He still got the buy-in, which is important. Yeah, and
it's great.
There's been so many misconceptions about Joe, and I love being the advocate for Joe, because if anyone was going to be biased against him, it'd be me. But he has buy-in. He's pretty cutting edge. He's overperformed in a lot of spots, and he has a championship. So there's still this perception that he's a weakness for this team. And it's like, oh man, they're going to shoot a lot of threes. And, I don't know if Joe's going to adjust. Like there's all these negative perceptions around him for a guy who's been so successful. This is a big year for me, for Joe, because I think for 3 seasons you could look at it and say, he's got the best talent in the league. Of course they won, and not credit him and his imprint on that. This could be a year where you're like, oh man, you see what Mazzulla did with that cast of characters up there in Boston? Like, this is where he might actually get some credit for coaching up this team.
Yeah.
And for
I
all
don't
the like,
disagree.
it hasn't been like a seamless playoff ride, right? There have been some series that we've broken down and
I
discussed
hated his
plenty of
playoff
times.
performance against the Knicks. Yeah.
But during the regular season, all 3 years that he was the head coach, this team, you know, you couldn't criticize the way that they were able to close out games. And ultimately, what were they, 60 plus wins all 3 of those years, or almost 60 plus wins? I think the first year they weren't, but like they've always kind of punched above their weight during the regular season. And so I wonder if that pattern will continue, because the regular season will probably end up being the you know, if not the entire year, but most of the year. So we're not expecting much of a playoff run here. So I'm curious, but I love that soundbite from Josh Minot, because you could tell how authentic it was. And it's always interesting to hear like a brand new player who probably knows Joe Mazzulla from viral Instagram clips, like to actually be in the room with him and to get that motivated. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Couple just programming notes. A quick reminder, PrizePicks, our partners here, Daily Fantasy Sports. If you want to get in on the action, download PrizePicks, use code CLNS to get 50 in your lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Pick more or less. It's that easy. Once again, code CLNS, get 50 in your lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Also, our friends over at Game Time. Once again, code CLNS on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Check it out. $20 off when you use the code CLNS. Terms do apply. If you haven't already, Noah snuck in a WNBA reference. What they do better over there. The best players defend. The scorers defend there. And you're going to see it at the highest level right now as the playoffs are underway. And also, you're going to see a whole bunch of new WNBA related content right here on the CLNS Media Network. Very much helmed by Noah Dalzell. WNBA Today. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and boy, we're inching closer every day. Subscribe now. Support us, support Noah, support the WNBA. Go check it out. A lot of good content. You get player interviews. You get Noah with her analysis on the games and the news, and there's going to be a lot more stuff coming to that channel as well. We're just getting started. It's in its infancy. It's already doing great support. We'd love it if you supported it even further. So please check that out. And also here, CLNS Media, subscribe, like us, share it, tell your friends. Go on Apple and Spotify. You can get the audio version of this show there as well. Rate, review it. All of that stuff helps us. Give us likes. We love it when you join the comments and do all of that stuff. So again, support the CLNS Media Network. We love bringing you this content here for free, and we rely on you guys to be able to do so. Guys, closing thoughts before we wrap it up as day one and we get to see some on the court action as training camp is set to begin. But final thoughts here before we wrap it up.
A shout out too, we had Derek on the Garden Report yesterday, so check out our interview with him. I got some thoughts from him going into training camp. So I'm intrigued by the Tatum stuff. I really am. Are the odds against them? Yes. But if that's going to be something that this team holds on to as hope and he's galvanized by and intrigues fans, I mean, the freak out really was something on Saturday, and it might all be bogus. He might be out for the season, but I just think it's something we can grasp onto this year and be intrigued by him trying to come back sooner than anyone would expect from this thing. So it'll get annoying sometimes, certainly, when we're overanalyzing him going up the stairs or him riding the bike or whatever mundane thing he's doing. But I'm all for anything that captivates the fan base or draws excitement or something like that. And that was fun over the weekend to me. So we'll keep following it as much as he continues to do any daily activity.
Yep.
No, biggest thing I'll say is just feel like because of the nature of this offseason being so like, is this guy about to get traded? I think we didn't talk much about Anfernee Simons during the offseason. And today when he was sitting there and he was talking about his excitement to be a part of a winning culture and how he's buying in and all of that, like, obviously it's the right things to say on day one, but it did kind of make me realize, like, hey, the Celtics acquired a top scoring option from another team this offseason for all the losses. And so just kind of intrigued to see how he's going to fit in. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about his acclimation in the coming days here.
So, and again, Noah, this isn't a disagreement, but it is the thing I'm most curious about, because I would love to get him to buy in. And when you enter a place like the Celtics that have been winning lately, and there is an expectation and a culture of winning and the type of people here who set that expectation, it's easier to fall in step. My concern is so much of that walked out the door. And if things don't go great, is Simons here as a mercenary hired gun looking to play for his next contract? I got to get mine, and that's all I care about. That's also in play. So I think that buy-in is easier when you enter last year's team, or, you know, a version of it, even not a complete one, as opposed to this one, which is kind of like, that's the fear. Is this going to be an every man for himself sort of situation here with some of these people coming in and these spare parts? Some of this stuff goes horribly wrong because everyone's playing for their next contract and not so much for this team. They're taking this low money. They're coming here. They're in a contract year, and they're like, I want to show the world that I belong.
Boucher's
in
in that position, Garza.
There's a few people there. And so again, I don't want to end it on a negative spin, but there is that concern. So you really do hope that the guys who are there, Brown, White, and again, this is where Al would have come in huge, can really lock in those other people and get them to understand what it means. And again, I'm going to cross sports reference. You see it when the Patriots, they had those veterans and they had that presence, and people would tell people how to act. And when they start to bleed out, you start to lose those, and you look around and they're not there anymore. You only got one guy and two guys. Who's telling these guys what it's like and what it's supposed to be? I wish there was a little bit more left, because they did lose so many key voices and veterans. And again, I don't want to undersell it. We talk about how important the addition of like Holiday and Horford were to this team. They were the adults in the room. These guys who like, hey, we're here for business, guys. I thought that didn't just elevate the lower players on the team. It elevated Tatum and Brown too. So I am curious how it plays
so
out.
big. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious how it plays out.
So long, like as a staple. Saying it and doing it. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But again, there's a lot more conversation. I do think you're going to get a good indication, first 10, 15 games here of like what you've actually got. And then we're going to see what happens from there. So I'm really excited to see actual games. But, we'll get to see these guys out there on the court. Noah and Bobby will be covering it. So make sure you follow along with everything Noah and Bobby do. Noah writing for Celtics blog and SB Nation, as well as covering the WNBA over at SB Nation, and Bobby here at CLNS Media. Stay with those guys for all the latest and greatest. We're going to wrap it up here on this edition of the Garden Report. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you. We'll be back later this week for sure. We don't know exactly when. Follow our socials for updates there. But thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see you later.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
fight Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke